The Galactic Council's most seasoned diplomats had seen countless worlds, negotiated with species that breathed methane and communicated through electromagnetic pulses, yet none of them could shake the unease that had settled over them since arriving on Earth 3 days ago. Ambassador Zephyrian adjusted his crystalline breathing apparatus as he studied the human delegation across the polished obsidian table. The humans sat with an unsettling stillness, their primitive biology somehow radiating an intensity that made his advanced neural processors skip calculations. At the head of their delegation sat Secretary General Maria Santos, a small woman whose dark eyes seemed to catalog every micro-expression, every slight shift in posture from the alien representatives. "The hegemony's terms are simple," declared High Chancellor Vorthak, his 6 arms spreading wide in what his species considered a gesture of magnanimity. "Complete disarmament of your orbital defenses, submission to galactic oversight, and tribute of 70% of your planetary resources. In exchange, we guarantee your species' continued existence." The other council members nodded in unison. This was how it always went with newly discovered species. Show overwhelming force, make reasonable demands, and watch the primitives capitulate. The humans had surprised everyone by requesting formal negotiations rather than immediate surrender, but the outcome would be the same. Secretary General Santos smiled, an expression that somehow made Zephyrian's scales ripple with discomfort. "We appreciate the Council's generous offer," she said, her voice carrying an odd harmonic that their translation devices struggled to process. "However, we have a counter-proposal." The chamber fell silent. Counter-proposals were not part of the standard protocol. "You see," Santos continued, rising slowly from her chair, "we've had some time to study your delegation since you arrived. 3 days, 14 hours, 22 minutes, and—" She glanced at her primitive chronometer. 18 seconds, to be precise. High Chancellor Vorthak's primary eyes narrowed. "What relevance—" "Ambassador Zephyrian," Santos interrupted, her gaze shifting to the crystalline being, "your metabolism requires a specific isotope of argon every 4.7 standard hours. You've been unconsciously checking your breathing apparatus every 37 minutes since our talks began, which means you're down to perhaps 6 hours of reserves." Zephyrian's manipulator appendages froze halfway to his apparatus. He hadn't been aware of the unconscious gesture. Santos turned to the next delegate. "High Chancellor Vorthak, your species' children undergo metamorphosis every 7 years. Based on the pheromone traces you've been unconsciously releasing, your youngest offspring is currently in their pre-metamorphic state. The stress indicators suggest this is weighing heavily on your mind. You want to return home soon." Vorthak's 6 arms drew closer to his body in an instinctive protective gesture. "And Mediator Quelix," Santos addressed the floating gelatinous being, "your quantum-entangled consciousness exists simultaneously across multiple dimensional planes. However, the gravitational field fluctuations we've detected suggest you're experiencing difficulty maintaining coherence in our reality. The effort is taxing." The chamber's atmosphere had shifted imperceptibly. What had begun as a routine subjugation negotiation now felt like something else entirely. "How could you possibly—" Zephyrian began. "Know these things?" Santos smiled again. "We've been watching, learning, every micro-gesture, every biochemical emission, every quantum fluctuation. Do you know what makes humans unique in your galactic catalog, gentlemen?" She walked slowly around the table, her footsteps unnaturally quiet on the polished floor. Every species you've encountered has evolved in specific niches. The Zephyrians in low-gravity crystalline caverns, the hegemony in high-pressure thermal vents, the Quelix across dimensional boundaries, each perfectly adapted to your environment, but limited by that same specialization. Santos paused behind Zephyrian's chair. He could feel her presence like a weight on his consciousness. Humans evolved as persistence hunters on a world that tried to kill us every single day. We learned to track our prey across vast distances, to notice every broken twig, every disturbed stone, every change in behavior that might mean the difference between a successful hunt and starvation. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. We learned to read the signs that said this animal is injured, this herd is nervous, this predator is hunting us. We survived because we could predict behavior, because we could see patterns that other species missed, because we never ever stopped watching. Santos returned to her seat, but somehow her presence still seemed to loom over every delegate in the room. Every one of you has been cataloged. Every habit, every tell, every weakness has been noted and filed. Your homeworld locations, your supply routes, your political structures. We've been listening to your secure communications since the moment you entered our solar system. High Chancellor Vorthak's voice carried the first note of uncertainty they'd heard from him. Impossible. Our encryption is based on mathematical principles that assume certain computational limitations, Santos interrupted. You've never encountered a species that builds quantum computers from scavenged asteroid materials and runs them on solar power. You've never met beings who treat impossible problems as interesting puzzles to solve during their spare time. She leaned forward, her hands folded calmly on the table. 3 days, 14 hours, 23 minutes, and 46 seconds. That's how long it took us to learn everything we needed to know about the Galactic Council, your individual species, and exactly how to dismantle your entire power structure without firing a single shot. The silence stretched on for what felt like eons. So here's our counterproposal, Santos continued conversationally. The Galactic Council will withdraw from Earth space immediately. You will establish formal diplomatic relations with humanity as equals, and in exchange, her smile returned. But this time it carried a different quality. Not threatening, but absolutely certain. In exchange, we won't demonstrate exactly what 3 billion years of evolutionary arms races have taught us about warfare. Mediator Quelix's gelatinous form rippled with distress patterns. This is unprecedented. No newly discovered species has ever been human, Santos replied simply. As the council delegates filed out of the chamber 3 hours later, their generous offer formally withdrawn, Zephyrian found himself compulsively checking his breathing apparatus every few minutes. The human secretary-general had been correct down to the second about his metabolic requirements, but more unsettling was the growing certainty that somewhere, somehow, human eyes were still watching, calculating, learning. The humans had negotiated peace, but they had also delivered a message that would echo through the galaxy. Humanity was not prey to be hunted. They were the hunters who had never stopped hunting, and now they had new prey.